Welcome back to episode 2 of The Extra Take. That's right, I'm your host, Chris, and I'm back with my co-host, Will. Will, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. We ripped the Band-Aid off last week or 2 weeks ago and started this podcast saying how to start a podcast. Well, you start by hitting record and jumping on and just, talking, I guess. And look at us, 2 podcasts. I think if we get past like podcast 10, we've already surpassed most podcasts. Like most people quit within the first 10. I'm pretty sure I saw a statistic about that.
So that's the goal. Get to 10 to start with. That's the first goal.
First goal, get to 10. We've got about 43 subscribers so far. So 43% to our goal of 100 subscribers before we can get Kahuna to come on to the podcast. I spoke about it with him a little bit today because I had him on the other podcast, the Nullified Take, and I said, I think one of the interesting topics we could talk about when he comes on is maybe like sports commentary, because he's got a lot of experience in doing that, especially for roller derby. So that could be a future podcast, which is quite niche.
One.
Yeah, a little bit different. So, I don't know. Do you know much about roller derby? Because I definitely don't.
I feel like I've seen a couple movies from back in the day, which was basically just girls just mashing themselves doing roller derby. I think there was a couple sort of old school 80s movies about it that I may have sort of watched back in the day, but it's a long time. It's sort of like wrestling on wheels, isn't it?
Yeah, again, I know nothing. So I think this is where it would be good to have someone with Kuna's expertise come on the podcast and talk to us about it. We've also got 2 people in the live already tonight here. We've got Bart saying, "Yalla, bro, let's hurry this thing up."
Go.
And Knight of Sidonia saying, "Hello, team. Welcome to you as well, Knight of Sidonia." So great to have people here early on in the live. We love to get the live audience involved, so the more people that drop in as the podcast grows, similar to the Nullified Take channel, which is my other channel, we try and get the live audience involved. Bring in, you can have your own questions or give us some insights in regards to what it's like for yourself if you've traveled. Today's topic is traveling, everything about traveling, how it changes you. I thought, well, we have a lot in common when it comes to the fact that we both have done some traveling, and I don't know about you, but traveling definitely shaped my life quite a bit. Like, I'm from South Africa originally, lived in a few different countries. We'll go into that. Every time I go back to South Africa now, I'm very aware of the fact that having traveled a bit, I feel like has given me like a very different view compared to people who've never left South Africa. Was that a similar experience for you, having gone abroad yourself and now being back in New Zealand?
Yeah. I was quite late to leave. I know you left quite young. I didn't actually get my first passport till I was 25, and basically I'm moving overseas at 20, and my wife and I moved overseas at 26. So we sort of just ripped that Band-Aid off and have spent the last 12 years, I think 9 of them have been out of the country. But yes, coming home after it's interesting. You sort of see things a little bit differently, and then people, you leave and come back after however many years and they're still complaining about the same things.
It's so true. That is so true. I do have a question for you. You said you traveled when you were 26 and did quite a bit of that, but you're a father of 3. Did you have like any kids when you moved the first time that you had to move with?
No. So the first move was we were still quite newly together, my wife and I. We were engaged at the time, so no children at that point. That's when we moved to the UK for a couple of years. After that, we came back to New Zealand to have children, and that's when we had our first child. And then after about 6-7 months, we decided actually we haven't finished scratching that travel itch, got the itchy feet, and then basically made the plan of heading back over to the Middle East. And I think he was about 11 months old when we moved out of the country the second time.
Yeah, and I bet you these people that are listening to this podcast that are thinking to themselves, I'd love to travel, but maybe I left it too late. I now have kids. I don't know if I should travel with kids. You did it with an 11-month-old. Do you have like any tips and advice to people that want to go on that journey with a kid? I mean, because it becomes more complex when it's not I'm a solo person, like I can make a decision tomorrow, like I did last year to move to Australia. It was not that difficult for me, but for parents, I feel like it's more complex.
It's different. You travel differently. When when my wife and I were traveling, just the 2 of us, you're seeing a lot of different things than we did, and you tailor your travel differently. When you're traveling with children, you've got to tailor it a little bit differently. You're not going to go out clubbing and stuff at nighttime, going to different bars and stuff like that. You're going to be doing daytime stuff, and you're home and in bed tucked away early because you know that you don't know who's going to wake up, and you're going to be prepared for things. Like I think we did a bit more freewheel traveling where we just sort of went, okay, let's just see where we end up. Traveling without health insurance, travel insurance. Definitely did not do that with the children, and we definitely, whenever we travel with children, we made sure we had travel insurance because you just don't know when someone's going to get sick or something important is going to get lost.
Yeah. Bart's bringing up Amsterdam. It sounds like there's a story to be told here. When did the Amsterdam trip happen? Was it when you moved to London to the UK, and then you went? Because a lot of people, they go to the UK and then they also see that as an opportunity to hop over and go into Europe. Was that around that time?
Yeah, Amsterdam was July 2012. I was working at the Olympics at the time. I was lucky enough to work for the London Olympics and the London Paralympics. Nice. And it was during one of the breaks that I had. We were able to get a super cheap trip to Amsterdam with I think 1 or 2 nights accommodation and a bus there and a ferry back or something along those lines. It was whatever it was super cheap. Amsterdam was quite entertaining. It was one of those ones where you partake in the brownies because you have to. We also did the Heineken brewery tour. Nice. which is of all the brewery tours that I've done, that was probably one of the better ones.
Over in Ireland, right?
No. This is the Heineken.
Sorry, no, I'm thinking Guinness. I'm thinking Guinness. Sorry,
I think Guinness. I've done the Guinness one as well, but the Heineken brewery, I actually rate the Heineken brewery tour over the Guinness brewery tour, because it was the Guinness one was more of a historical tour, whereas the Heineken one was more just, hey, look, this is how we make beer, and here's a few extra beers to fill your skin. Really, it was good fun. But no, Amsterdam was a bit of a trip, really.
Leave it at a little bit of a trip.
It's a concern when you both sit there after having brownie, going, okay, I don't think this has worked, and then about 10 minutes later, you've got you're in the Burger King and you're looking at each other, giving each other evils because you're worried the other person's going to finish the chips before you do.
So for those that are from the US, I know we've got a lot of people in the main channel that listen from the US. I don't know if it's the same over there, but if you give someone the evils, it means that you're staring them down, basically, because you're not
giving them that look like, hey, this is mine.
I started in London as well. So, or the UK was my first trip, but like you said, very different to yours. I was 18 years old, just finished school. Always knew that I was going to get out of South Africa at some point. Like, it just always felt, I don't know why, like I'm definitely different because the rest of my family, brother, sister, mom and dad all still live in South Africa. I, for some other reason, always knew from a very young age. I think I was like 13 the first time I told my mom I'm going to move away from South Africa. I always just knew it instinctively. It's interesting how people are different like that. South Africa's got its problems and there's a lot of good changes happening there, and maybe that's a podcast for a different time. But at the time, I just didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of the misery I saw growing up around. And it's actually also one of the reasons why I've never wanted to travel to I don't do the travel to like India or to like these countries where you have to see how the other part of the world live, because I grew up in it. So I don't necessarily feel the need to go back to it, where some people are like, I want to see what the rest of the world lives like if they're not in, the West. But for me, it was very different. So obviously moving over, and we've got Karen from Dunedin and as well. Hello, Karen. So obviously for me, moving to London as an 18-year-old, having grown up in like rural South Africa in a small town about 2 hours drive from Cape Town, it was such a mind-blowing
experience. You moved to the bright lights, man. You moved to the bright lights.
It was mind-blowing. And for some other reason, my year of high school, a lot of us ended up going after high school. So I had about 2 or 3 different friends that went around there the same time. I did enjoy my time there very much, but I made sure that I actually left with savings, because the goal was to go over and earn the pounds and then go back and potentially go study. That was the game plan going to London. But then I ended up not stopping, like leaving. Like, I mean, since 18, I've never been back. Like, I went from, London to the US, from US to New Zealand, and obviously I've traveled quite a bit since then. But, what an experience. Like, even just, for someone that's never traveled, I don't know if you found this hard. Maybe it's because my first language is Afrikaans, not English. But when I first moved to England, like, even the accents was so difficult to understand. Like, I had to really listen, especially for people who were living up in the northern part of the country, like like the Yorkshire accents, and anybody from Liverpool, and then you've got the Scottish accents. Like, I really struggled with that when I moved over. Did you find that culture shock as well, or was it a bit easier for you? I know there's a big Scottish influence in New Zealand.
There is. I think I also grew up watching a lot of UK old British TV. That was a lot of that sort of underpinned a lot of my childhood watching. So there was a lot of those accents. You got your parents that are watching Coronation Street and EastEnders always, and those sorts of things where you're hearing that accent all the time. No, I didn't notice the accent so much. There was the odd bit. So we actually started, I mentioned we're in London. Our first place was actually Coventry. We were sent to Coventry, as the saying goes, for teaching. So we were up a little bit closer to Birmingham, and that's got a bit of an interesting accent in itself. But no, we were okay. I think they struggled to understand my wife a little bit because she speaks quite quickly, and with that Kiwi accent, we definitely had an older neighbor that used to live across the road, and he used to really struggle when she started talking because he'd just sort of sit there and he'd start looking like, yeah, I'm trying really hard to understand you. But no, we were okay with the British one. Definitely other travel spots were interesting, but England, we were okay.
Coventry, missed that white lightning from Knight of Sidonia. So you went over when you went to Coventry, did you go and straight away you went into teaching? You were already at that level? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we actually were employed through a teaching agency. So they actually organized our work visas and our flights. Like, they paid for our flights to Coventry, to England. And all we had to do was we had to work with them for a certain amount of days, basically for them to recoup their income. And that was a trip in itself. When we first moved over, they were like, "Oh, we'll put you in a flat with a group of teachers." I'm like, "Sweet, that'd be great." And they're all Australians and English teachers. And so we arrive, and it's their midterm break, which is like a week in between 6 weeks, and then there's a week in between. 6 weeks of schooling, and then a week, and then 6 weeks. So we arrive on like the Sunday night, and they're like, "All right, we've organized to have a party for you guys as you arrive." And we're like, "Oh, okay, cool." Now, we were retired. We just got off a long haul flight, and my wife's not one for socializing like that anyway. And I'm like, "Oh no, I'll jump in there." And before we know it, I get this message from my wife going, "There's something going down in the bathroom." I'm like, "Okay." And sure enough, two of the teachers that were working there, the Australian teachers, were in the process of inhaling white powder in the bathroom. And we'd just come from Blenheim in New Zealand, and we were supposedly staying with a whole lot of teachers. And so it definitely caught us by surprise, and to the point where there was, anyway, the next morning we were like, right, we actually need to get out of this flat. This is not the most comfortable position for us to be in. So we found our own place, like, in very quick smart, like 2 days. And Knights of Sidonia, that white lightning, that's a very cheap cider, Chris, that you can purchase. That comes in like 3 liter bottles, and you only need 1 3-liter bottle.
Right. Yeah. So for me, it was interesting. You talk about the flat situation, being 18, going over there, even just getting on a plane for the first time was such a mind-blowing experience. Like, I'm actually doing this. Like, I'm leaving everybody behind, and I'm going to a country where my cousin lived there, but he lived in Sheffield, which was obviously miles away. So I kicked off and stayed with him for a week before heading down to London, where all the work opportunities were. And my mom, she knew, like, through connection, someone who lived there that I could, like, her daughter was there as well. So I didn't even know the person myself, but I ended up sleeping on a couch for like a week or two there, typical flat with a bunch of people, in England, especially, I don't know if it was the same for you, especially because I was from that younger age demographic. Like, a lot of people were between the 18 and 23 range who weren't necessarily in professional jobs. You'd have these little houses with like 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms, but 9 people staying in it, and people being in like a room. Yeah, like I remember my first house that we had. There was 5 rooms. We were 9 people. There was 1 bathroom with 1 bath, and everybody had to use the bath. So you had scheduled time when you needed to get into the bath in the morning before you can get out. And bloody hell, England gets cold, especially for an African boy that comes from South Africa, where the weather's like 40 degrees, going into snowy weather in the mornings, and your schedule dictates that you have to get into this bath at like 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. in the morning so that you can get out and walk to the train station and go in to go do your work. So my experience was completely different because I was so young. I was living on the cheap. I did manual labor. My first job I ever did was aluminium and glazing, and one thing I did really, I think one thing that definitely shaped me quite a bit early on, and which is why I'm now in sales, is that I had to learn to think on my feet very quickly without anybody giving me direction, right? So when I found the first house, which was a South African guy who was renting it with like a bunch of other South Africans at the time, immediately while I was looking at the house, I said to him like, hey, I've loaned money from my dad for like 2 months worth of rent. I can pay that, but I need a job. Do you know anybody? And he took me to a mate's place the same night that I was there for the flat. And I did an interview with this guy at this massive beard, very tall South African guy, very burly, much older than me, probably like 30 back then. And he's like, yeah, come in on Saturday and we'll trial you out. So I had to go work the Saturday for free so they could see if I'm a hard worker and if they wanted to employ me. So it was such a different experience for me going in because, obviously different. So my beginning was just, okay, I just need to survive, where at least you were in like that professional.
I was guaranteed work. Like that was the thing. Because they needed to make their money back from us. So we were guaranteed work. We just had to turn up, and they would tell us what buses we need to get on, what we needed to, you need to be at this point, get on this bus, get off at this stop, walk 200 meters down the road, and there's the school type thing.
Fat Dad Slim here says, surely there's more to partake in Amsterdam. Surely there is, but Will was already a taken man by the time that he went there, so he had to be on his best behavior.
We did do a candlelight cruise, which was quite entertaining. So we'd done the Heineken brew tour in the morning, and that was done by about midday. Then we did the brownies. That was sort of started wearing off by about 5 in the afternoon, and then we did a candlelight cruise, which was really cool. But it was also free-flowing wine, and I'm quite can be quite a competitive person. And so I asked him about the cheese, but we'll get there. Well, that was one thing. Yeah. So to sidetrack, while having had the brownie and then after the chips had run out, we decided we were going to go sample Amsterdam Dutch cheese. And so there are different cellars that you go into and sample the different cheese. So we were on this one street, and we thought it was a street full of cheese vendors, and we were just going from cheese place to cheese place. It wasn't until the next day, very hungover, that we realized that we were only 2 cheese places, and we keep going backwards and forwards between them. But so it was we had a lot of cheese, but it was this poor 2 shops that we just keep going back to. But the candlelight cruise was great because had as much wine as you could drink, a platter of crackers and cheese, and then they take you around the canals and show you different bits and houses and stuff, and then they take you through, as I'm probably sure Fat Dad Slim was alluding to, was the red light district, and then they take you through a walking tour of the red light district, and the narrowest red light district street with the big windows and the curtains. And I must admit, I did find it quite entertaining that I didn't realize, and it just shows you the naivety of me, I suppose. And we'd only been out of the country 9 months at this point. Was I didn't realize that the lights denoted certain things, and the lights were a good, quick, easy way to identify what services you were getting to potentially. So, so you get full red lights, but then there was also red lights with a blue light at the bottom. And that meant that it was all female until you got to a certain point.
Good to know before heading over.
So avoid any potential, unless
you're into that.
Unless that's what you're after.
It's good to know. It depends on how you interpret it. Like, it's good to know depending on what your preferences are. I'm not judging any preferences here.
Not in the
But yeah,
slightest, but I was definitely caught me by surprise. So we just
I've never been
carried on.
to Amsterdam, so I'm definitely noting that one down. I have traveled to France, to Paris, and I've been to Germany before, to Munich, and I definitely want to go back. I didn't do enough of Europe. The thing that for me was shocking when I first went over to Europe is the fact that you have to pay to use the loo. That's such a foreign thing to me in Europe, where you're like, you're busting, but you're going to pay like £2 or something, whatever, or €2 back then, just to use the loo. Like, so for people who've never traveled to Europe, just be aware, if you want to tinkle, you got to pay, over there.
That's actually where kids can come in handy, because quite often the children, if you happen to go up to a place and you've got like a child that desperately needs the toilet, often the people that was potentially standing there asking for the money would just let you through, like, oh, no problem, go, get your little one through to the toilet. So you get them to finish off, then you go yourself.
benefits.
So
if you're in Europe,
benefits.
if you're in Europe,
don't borrow a child. If you're
don't borrow a child. I was almost going to go there, but I you know me too well, Will. I was like, I don't know if I can say borrow a child.
You can't be going, I need your child because I need to go to the toilet. That would just not go down.
No, I think I could get you in trouble. Could get you in a lot of trouble. And by the way, we should probably say we're not giving we're not expert travel experts here. Like, we're not giving travel advice, So I feel like one of us should be a little bit more of a travel expert, but I'm not yet. I've only been in the travel industry, working in the travel industry for 7-8 months now. But yeah, definitely different. Did you get to do any other places in Europe while you were there, or was Amsterdam, Netherlands your
No, we did quite a bit. Well, not as much as we would have liked. We did a lot more later with the kids. So we did a lot of the UK travel through Scotland and Wales, and then we did Amsterdam, Greece. We did Rome and a bit of Italy as well. But my wife and I, we were, because when you travel, and especially you would have found when you're in London, there's the onus to try and do like those bus about tours where you sort of a whistle stop tour around as many places as you can. And that didn't really interest Megan or my wife or I. It didn't interest us. We didn't really want to do those bus abouts. We were a little bit older, because the bus abouts are often sort of 26 and under, 25 and under. They're a bit more of sort of like a hookup bus between different places, and that wasn't really what we wanted. We also wanted to spend more time in set places. So like when we did Rome, we were in Rome for a week. We did Istanbul. We did the Gallipoli Anzac Day service. And then we had 5 days in Istanbul after that. So you could really get to know a city. And that's what so we didn't travel to as many places at that stage, but the places we stayed at for a longer time. So we were able to sort of partake in a lot more and get to know the city a bit more.
Nice.
We weren't rushed.
Well, that kind of experience, like, listen, if it doesn't work out for you in your current job, I know a guy who looks for travel consultants all the time, so I can talk to him.
Okay. Yes. That's all right.
It's this guy, by the way, like, if you don't know. So yeah, no, I feel like with your experience, you'll be all right as a travel agent.
Yeah, it was great, mate. Honestly, and that was what we did. We just like a week and a week and a week, and that, because we talked to so many people that were at our point where they were looking at traveling and had maybe done a bus about or had done one of those sorts of tours, and they would spend a morning in a place before they're hopping on a bus to go somewhere else, and they knew they'd been to them. They may have had the photo in front of the place, but they couldn't tell you much else about it. Whereas for us, we were able to deep dive into, like, we were in Rome. And we had a little Kiwi that we used to travel around with to take photos. And we went and did the Vatican tour and did all that. And as we were coming out, we asked one of the Swiss guards to get a photo with our Kiwi. And he sort of stopped and took the photo. And then he gave us this piece of paper, and it was an invitation written in Latin. And it was an invitation to like a presentation, a viewing by the Pope at the time. So we had the special invitation. It took us a bit of Google translating and everything else, and to figure out what the actual invitation said, because it was in Latin and in Italian, and we didn't speak either. But by the time we got it, it was the next day, or it was 2 days later. And because we weren't just on a bus and off, we were actually able to go, okay, we can actually go to that. So we were able to go to a full-on Pope presentation where he comes rolling in on his Pope mobile, and you've got all these different, it's like a religious rock star, but whereas instead of them throwing underwear, they were throwing like flowers and little things that they wanted blessed. And so like those sorts of experiences we wouldn't have been able to do if we were going. And like I said, we didn't get to as many places. Like we still haven't been to Paris. We still haven't been to the Eiffel Tower, but we've been to sort of other places for a bit longer. We did a bit different. Our travel was different when we had kids. And we traveled a lot more around Europe with them. But yeah.
So I the first time I went to because I've been back to the UK since I lived there for 2 years. I left, obviously, did the American thing, and then went over to New Zealand. And then I always told myself when I left the UK to go back, and I only went back because my 2-year visa ran out. At the time, you could get a 2-year working holiday, which South Africans can no longer get if they want to go to the UK. They've removed that. So I was part of the lucky generation that got to experience the UK on a working holiday. But you know, when I went back, I always promised myself, I said, one day I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back as a tourist. I'm going to just, you know, because I spent a lot of time grinding, working, saving money. Did I have good times? Did I go out and, you know, go to like the Walkabout pub and all those places while I was there? 100%.
Shabu?
Yeah.
Did you have
I
the snake bite?
Yeah, I was there. I enjoyed myself, but I would say I was there. I had a goal, and my goal was to save money because I was going to go back and study. That was always the plan with going to London and to the UK. And I traveled mainly for work during that time. So, you know, even when I went to go see Germany and France, that was on the second time going back. I ended up, after living in New Zealand for so long, in 2015, the Rugby World Cup was over in the UK. So with a bunch of mates, traveled over back to the UK. We did all of the games for the Rugby World Cup. I actually went to Birmingham at that time as well. South Africa played there. Went back to Ireland, Scotland, did a proper, I did Glasgow the first time I lived there for work, but I never saw Edinburgh until I went back. Edinburgh is amazing.
It is cool. We've been there maybe 3 times. We've been there 3 times. We went for the 3 times, definitely 2 times. We went once for the Hogmanay, which is their New Year's festival. And if I can recommend anyone wants to have like a really cool New Year's, that was fantastic. And then went to the Tattoo, and at which also at that time they have the Fringe Festival as well, which is just a really cool experience too. So yeah.
So I've never done, you know, you get the red tour buses and things like that. I've never done them before. Similar to kind of what you said, I like to just go in and explore, look at the map, pick spots that I think is going to be of interest, and then go. You know, TripAdvisor is obviously always good. It has really good tips for you if you're interested to know what are some of the hot things that you could be doing in a certain place and you don't know where to go. But I did do the rec tour bus while I was there, and it was very informative. In fact, I probably would think about doing something like that again in the future. But what I really enjoyed about Edinburgh is one of those cities where you go to it where it's got the modern side to it, but then it's built in between just historic buildings. And you once again just realize, when you live in New Zealand, and I lived there for 15 years, right? That was predominantly home for the majority of the last decade and a half for me. You realize New Zealand is such a new country, and the history just isn't there compared to a place like Scotland or a lot of Europe or the UK. And in Edinburgh, you know, that history that you see between, you walk down a little street, you could be walking in somewhere in the 1600s because it looks that old. And, you know, we went into this underground club which was underneath a castle in there, and it was just an amazing time. And everybody was so friendly. Edinburgh, 100%, it's a standout for me when I went back as well to go and visit. So I would highly recommend for people to go and see it. You know, Scotland, just be aware, it's very cold up there. Whenever you go there, it's always cold. You know, that's why we get so many of the Scottish moving to Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, because they moved to, but then they moved to Dunedin and Southland, and it's the same as what it is there. Edinburgh is fantastic.
Just worse insulation. I'll say worse insulation in New Zealand compared to Scotland. The houses is not built the same.
Yeah. No, we loved Edinburgh. And they have in the wintertime, they have a ice skating rink at the base of the castle. So you've got the castle over and above. So like me, I didn't do it. I didn't trust myself. I'm going to break something if I go ice skating. But Megan went ice skating, and you got this perfect ice skating rink with all the Christmassy lights, because it's Christmas, New Year's, it's cold and it's dark, and then you've just got the castle illuminated behind it. It's just a stunning situation. I just had to laugh. You mentioned about the bus abouts, like those red bus tours. So we utilized them a lot when we traveled with kids, because it was a nice, safe, easy way to travel around the city without having to carry everything and lug everything. And there was this one time that we had purchased the 24 or 48 hours, because you purchase it for like however many hours that you want, like 24 hours or a 48-hour block, and you can basically hop on and hop off at any of the stops for that time. And we had been walking and had a late night, like an early morning, and we were traveling with my oldest son at the time was 3.5, and our middle son was only about 4 months old. And we were knackered, and we're like, right, let's just hop on the bus and we'll do a full loop, which was about an hour and a half of around the town. And we'd already done it the day before and already had a good look, but we were like, okay, let's just hop on the bus, because our youngest needed a nap. Next thing you know, all 4 of us out to it, sound asleep. Basically used the bus as a roving sort of sleep spot for us. And we just sort of, once we all woke up, we're like, right, we'll hop off again and we're good to go. But it was great. We were nice and safe. We had all our bags all shut up. And all 4 of us, people would have just hopped on and off and went, look at this family. Sound asleep.
Yeah, what are they doing? Sleeping on the bus. They're missing the whole tour.
And we just used it, and because this is great. I'm quite happy to sleep on a bus. And it was just this nice little, and then you woke up and you go, right, where are we? Okay, let's go and explore this castle that we've just pulled up outside of.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Now obviously, you go there, then go back to, I guess, New Zealand. What was it like in the initial, after that, moving back? Because obviously at some point you had that bug, it bit you, having traveled a little bit. When did you decide, like, what was it, the initial moments like? And were you at first happy to be back? And when did you realize, I wanted to go and do more? I haven't seen enough.
Well, the first time we came back was after our 2-year youth mobility scheme visa had run out. So for those that don't know, New Zealand and Australians can move to, and I think it's anyone in the Commonwealth potentially, but definitely New Zealand and Australians can go and get a youth mobility scheme visa through and work in the UK. And I think it used to be only up to the age of 26. I think it's extended now, maybe up to maybe 30. But yeah,
people work better. They keep moving our superannuation, our retirement funds to later, so they have to allow us to have like longer, work span. Like that. That's why.
So we were at the end of our 2 years, which was like my wife's job. They would have kept her working, but I was quite keen to get back. I'd sort of got a bit over the cold and dark and everything else. I was quite keen to get back to New Zealand. So applied, got a job, came back, and yeah, pretty promptly. Like I think the problem was we moved from London, which is this big hub, bright lights, going to West End shows every other week, to Picton, which is beautiful scenery and a fantastic place if you've got a boat. But if you don't have a boat, the scene, it's quite a small place. And I think it was nice for the first few months, but after that it was like, okay, we're back now. Like I said, we're pretty quick to identify that we wanted to travel again, and started looking at different options pretty quickly, and talking to friends that were out and were traveling and living overseas. And so we had a family, a couple that we knew that were in the Middle East and loving it, and it was a nice, like, where they were in the Middle East was safe. There's a lot to see, and then it's a nice, easy place to travel from. And it also, as we know, New Zealand's not the cheapest, and we wanted to be able to keep my wife home with our son who had just been born, and there was no way we could afford to be doing that in New Zealand on a teacher salary. So we went, do you know what? I can do that in the Middle East on a teacher salary. Let's go do that. So it was a sort of a few different things that sort of lined up to make us go, let's go traveling again.
So for me, the first time going back was after the UK, but I went back for like a very short period because my brother just finished school. Like he's a couple of years, he's actually a year and a half younger than me. So he was 2 years, behind me in school. So when he finished school, he's like, I want to go overseas as well. I want to earn some good money, because he realized I earned some great money working overseas. And I was like, well, my 2-year visa is gone. I can't go back to the UK. But let's look at America, and he's like, yeah, let's do America. And my brother, unlike me, like I can work with my hands. My dad, he's a builder. He's into construction. My brother now is in business with him. Most of my family are like farmers and things like that. They're in that community. So I'm kind of like a little bit of the outlier in the sense that I'm a little bit more analytical, use my mind a lot more for my work in a different way. Obviously, you use your mind differently when you do building and construction. And it's a skill that I don't have. Like, oh, I have it, but I'm not great at it. They're great at it, right? For us to go to the US, we got this opportunity to go work on a farm. So having grown up always on the farm with my uncle and my granddad and things like that, I knew how to drive a tractor. I knew how to drive a truck. Well, I kind of lied that I didn't have a license for the truck to get the job on that side, and then had to go get the license when we were in the US and drove one of those big 18-wheelers around. But again, I was about 20 when I went there. So great time to go over. It was weird having lived in London, where I was able to go into a pub, I could drink, do all that kind of stuff. And when I went over to the US, I couldn't do any of that. So I had to roll back because I was 20, and I was like, oh, I've been doing this for 2 years. This is weird, And I had my 21st while I was actually in the States as well. So that was a really cool event. We went to Mount Rushmore. I forgot the town that was close to where we went out, and the night that it was my birthday, I was close to Mount Rushmore. We went out. It was a great time. Definitely got way too drunk. Sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening. And it's really funny because. Yeah, but because back then, funny enough, I was the one that would have the cheeky drink here and there. My brother wouldn't. And now I don't drink. My brother does. He's the one who gets into the drink. So it's weird how you kind of like change and stuff over the time. But definitely I got in more trouble when I was younger, for sure. Like, because I'd do stuff like that. And, but anyways, it was a good time. And I went to the US. The US is almost, the first time I was there almost doesn't count, because I predominantly worked. Like I was working 7 days a week. 14, 16-hour days. It was a lot of hard work, made a truckload of money, made more money there than what I'd even did in the UK, because you couldn't spend it and everything was paid for. They gave you accommodation, they gave you food, and all that kind of stuff. But my first time having that feeling of going back was then after that, because there was 3 years of living abroad, going back to South Africa, having the money to pay for my studies. I accumulated all of that, applied to get to study in South Africa, got accepted. And then about, I don't know, 3 months before I was supposed to go, I was like, nah, I'm done. Can't be in South Africa. I'm going, I'm going somewhere else. And for me, it was just, I couldn't fit back into the mentality at the time that people had in South Africa at that time. Love the country, but, again, South Africa's got a lot of problems, which I do think is getting better. It's getting worked on. I don't want to be that guy that just talks bad about the country. That there's a lot of good stuff happening as well. But for me at that time, I was just like, you know what? I know what it's like on the other side of the world. I know, like, when a government works, when things happen, it's not the bureaucracy or the issues that you have in South Africa that you have to deal with. So my auntie and cousin lived in New Zealand, in Invercargill. So that's when I went to Invercargill at the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand. Traveled over there and had to apply for work and stuff like that. And what an experience it was. I thought I would go there and like spend maybe, again, like I've always done, 2 years there, hop over to Australia, do something. And then I got stuck for 15 years because, like you said, it's an expensive place, but New Zealand is quite magical as well. Like if you've ever been to New Zealand, the people are special. They're friendly. I don't know. It's the island vibe that you have there. I felt home as soon as I couldn't explain it, but when I arrived in New Zealand, I felt home, more at home than I ever felt in the UK or the US, because the culture was so similar. We all loved rugby. It was a terrible time to go over because South Africa just won the World Cup in 2007 and people did not want to talk rugby to me. But still, there was a lot of similarities and I had a lot of fun. Why do you think, as someone that is a Kiwi who, obviously is born and bred, why do you think so many people do gravitate towards New Zealand? Because New Zealand's got, a large population of immigrants who now go there to get a better opportunity at life. And, you wouldn't necessarily think that New Zealand would be the first choice. It's such a small place. It's on the corner of the earth, but it does have a lot of popularity when it comes to immigration.
Lord of the Rings.
Everybody wants to be part of. They just want to say, "I've been to the land."
Everyone wants to be a hobbit, man. I think genuinely the scenery and the lifestyle that you've just explained is probably the biggest sort of hook. New Zealand advertises around the world really well. That the old 100% clean and green advertising, and just genuine, like, if you're a nature lover, if you're someone who likes going out into the mountains and going to the rivers and the sea and fishing and skiing and those sorts of things, New Zealand has it in spades. You know, there's a certain stat, I think, from memory, that you are never more than about 210 or 220 kilometers away from either the mountains or the sea, no matter where you are.
Insane,
So it's got a bit of everything for anyone that likes that sort of thing. It's safe. By and large, it's a lot safer than a lot of other countries. You talked about governments that work. Not good. We're not that we get into talking about politics, but it is a country that we're lucky. You know, when we traveled, you talk to different people from different countries.
When we talk about a government here, and we don't want to get too heavy into politics, but one thing I always appreciated about New Zealand is that it's not too polarizing one way or the other. And it has this swing in government where you always would see one side will take over for a couple of terms and then the other side will come in. But it's actually, and I know some people, it can also annoy them because they feel like not enough happens on each side, but it actually has like a really good balance to it. I feel like, compared to, I don't know if it will be able to keep that long term, because the trend around the world, you know, I've always said, a lot of people, and again, I don't want to get too heavy into politics, but, you know, I've always said that whatever happens in the US does have a direct reflection of what will follow in the rest of the world. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because, you know, if it's polarizing on that side, at some stage it will even reach a little country like New Zealand, which is kind of on its own. But one of the things that made it special is that it's not as polarizing. Like, people seem to be a lot more sort of central.
It's a hard. I try and stay out of it as best as I can. But that is definitely one of the reasons why New Zealand is quite a popular destination for a lot of people. And it is a long way away to go, though. So if people get here, they get stuck. It's cost them too much to leave.
Yeah, it took me like, that was one thing I will say. The biggest shock for me after having lived in the UK and in America was how expensive it was and how little I got paid when I first got there. So I was on minimum wage, took the first job I could, then had to work my way up, because again, I didn't go over with qualification. I didn't even study at that time yet. So I had to work my way up. And just to survive, I pretty much just survived for the first, I'd say, 9 months. When I was there, I didn't do anything but work, pay my rent, bought food, and tried to be physically active and do some stuff. Because like you said, beautiful nature, you can go out and walk and do all that kind of stuff. But I was just trying to survive at first when I got there. And that was a shock. And if it wasn't for my experience over in the UK, I think if I went to the US first, where I had so much disposable income, I would have been in trouble by the time I went to New Zealand. But the UK really made me work well with my money, which helped by the time that I got to New Zealand. But then it's so interesting, because New Zealand is, to me, the land of opportunity. It's like, if you go in there and you work really hard, I just found that I was finding these pathways to get ahead in my career, and I was given opportunities insanely. People were judging me based on my work ethic, nothing else, you know, in New Zealand. And I really appreciated that. And I think that's the reason I stayed there for as long as I did, because I got to a point. The opportunities was amazing over there, because New Zealand desperately needs people. Like, it's a small country. To keep the economy going, it needs hardworking people. So I feel like that was something that really helped me. So, and it's so hard, like, maybe this is a chat for a different podcast, because there was so much that happened in that space of 15 years. But long story short, couldn't stay on the South Island, was way too quiet for me, especially having lived in places like London, Cape Town at times in my life, and big cities. Moved to Christchurch. Christchurch was still too quiet for me. Ended up in Auckland, spent about 11 years in Auckland, which, you know, there's the saying in New Zealand, Jaffas, just another fucking Aucklander. That's what they call people over in Auckland. But I actually loved Auckland for most of the time that I stayed there, and then it just got unbearable, like expensive after the COVID stuff. And I unfortunately had to make the decision. I was like, no, I've got to take the opportunity to come to Australia, see what other opportunities are out there. And it finally, the scale just outweighed it for me more than anything else, which is unfortunate because I love my time in Auckland. I love my time in New Zealand, and never say never. I'm still a citizen, could always come back, things can change.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. It was sort of after COVID that you went, okay, it's time to bounce. And it was COVID was the main reason we came home. We decided that with having our boys, they're growing up, we wanted to give them a bit of a Kiwi upbringing, and that sort of changed our priorities. COVID changed them quite dramatically, actually. So it's been good. Travel's an interesting one. I did have a question for you. It says, I'll be curious to know what, where is it? I've got it written down here. What sort of off the beaten path destination have you been to that you'd recommend for people?
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. So the most off the beaten destination that I went to, actually, funny enough, you'd be very familiar with this, would be Oman.
Yes. Yep.
I loved Oman. Yeah, such a great experience. I was fortunate enough, like I never ever thought I would do a cruise in my life. But one of my mates, he's the biggest supporter of cruises, loves it, gets on it all the time. And, he had a spot available on his cruise. And he's like, hey, I need someone else to jump in, because in cruises, if you book a cruise, a hot tip for anybody out there who ever wants to go do a cruise, when they put the price on there, it's per person. So you got to pay double that amount. Each person's got to pay that amount to get a cabin, right? So he had a cabin that somebody bounced last minute, and he's like, I need this, do you want to come and do this cabin share with me and pay for the other half? And I said, why not? He's a good mate, one of my best mates ever, and we did the World Cup stuff together in Japan and also in the UK. And I decided, let's do it. And going over, that was my first time in Dubai. Loved my time in Dubai. You got to see how the glitz and glamour is people live over in Dubai. It's really got everything. And I've always said I want to go back to Dubai 100%. I love my time there. But then got onto this cruise from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, through to Oman, to Coral Fakan and all those kind of areas, and absolutely loved it. The people were so friendly, so nice. I was in awe of the dedication that they have to their religion, with the call to prayer going off and everything closing, and people going, how open they were for us to walk in their temples and things like that. Obviously, if you were a lady, you had to cover yourself, but still you show that respect because you're in their country. They've got their traditions and things that they do there. But yeah, it was off the beaten track. I never thought I would travel to Oman, but even up until this day, when people ask me, where's your favorite destination? It's often between Oman and Japan. Japan probably just tips it because there's more to do.
I haven't been to Japan. That's one. Yeah, that's in my top probably 3 places that I desperately want to travel to.
I would say Japan, like based off the places that I've gone to, if you're thinking of Japan, put it on the list, do it. Like, just tick it off like if you can, because so much stuff that you can do there. I know you're a big anime fan, you're into that. So the anime culture there is massive. Obviously, you're going to see all of that. And the history, I love the history. I'm a, like, not that I always know, like I can recall all of the different historical events and dates. I'm very bad with dates, but going to like Kyoto, for instance, there and walking in Kyoto, very much a similar feel to the Edinburgh feeling, where you're walking down this little pathway and you've got these very samurai old looking buildings around you, where you're like, I could be in the samurai era walking down this street, right? And again, the people so friendly. And I think, when we talk about how to travel changed me, now when there's these things, and again, not wanting to get political, but when there's these news articles about certain people being bad and all these kinds of things coming up, and I'm like, if you've traveled a bit in your time, that people are people at their core. Yes, is there some countries that have got more corrupt people? 100%. I come from a country that has a lot of corrupt people, but it also has a lot of good people, people that are struggling in South Africa. But, you get that around the world. I think that is the biggest thing. And I think for me, it made me more tolerant to different opinions and takes of how to do things. Everybody's got their own unique sense of what's right and wrong and how they do it. And it gave me respect for those different cultures. I don't know if that was similar for you with your take, because obviously going to the Middle East, that would have been, I would imagine, a culture shock as well.
It was it's little things like the shops closing in the afternoon and not opening again until nighttime, and those sorts of things were things that took us a little bit to adapt to. But then actually we noticed a lot in the UAE, sort of became a lot more Western as we were there. When we first arrived, Ramadan, everything was shut. You couldn't order food during the day, and it was very, very quiet. When we left 3 years ago, that was a completely different situation. You could order, everything was sort of left open, and we actually. It was interesting. We left feeling actually it was a bit of a shame. We quite liked that uniqueness that when Ramadan hit, all the food things were closed during the day, and we actually didn't mind it. And it seemed funny to us that things were now starting to be open. Food things were starting to be open during that time. But no, culturally, we actually
did you have to use the long drop, or did you get the that was something for me, especially when I was going to Oman. I was like, oh, okay, this is like authentic over here. It's not like Dubai where you get both options. And obviously also the bidet is very new to me. I wasn't used to that at all. Going into the bathrooms is all that was different. But it's actually so much more efficient than what we do in the Western society. I feel like than having toilet paper. Like, sorry to take the chat down to the gutters, but it's just some of the things that stand out, but it's different.
Oh mate, no. See, my first run-in with a squat toilet was Singapore. And then my worst run-in with a squat toilet was actually in Rome. But that's another day.
It can get worse. Well. It can get worse.
Oh my lord!
I've seen India. I've seen India's toilet.
Yeah, I haven't done India, but my Italian Rome squat toilet stories. One for another day too, I think. But no, Oman is a fantastic spot. So that'd be your off the beaten path, sort of not as common place to visit.
I'd say so.
For me, I'd have to say Romania. Romania was definitely one we traveled to. We traveled there with our two boys, and while we traveled, we actually caught an overnight train from Budapest to Bucharest. And on the train, Sawyer, who was at that point like 3-4 months old, got super sick. So he actually my wife and him ended up spending a bit of time in Bucharest private hospital, and so that sort of changed our original plan. But Romania was absolutely stunning. It was a country that we talk about history, but then we talk about sort of going back in time. That was very much a country that sort of you felt like you're going back in time a little bit. And going to the Bran Castle, vampires and sort of history of that sort of history. And flailings and heads on spikes and all those sorts of things were just that was how that country ran, and that was super, super interesting. And the only meal you didn't have alcohol with was breakfast. I feel like they had this homemade plum wine called Suica. And it was literally every meal you were given a shot of it. And it just kept going from there. But no, Romania was definitely probably my pick for off the beaten track places if I could recommend it. My wife's cousin, who's 22, is currently backpacking at the moment. He just started off in Istanbul, and he's currently in Bulgaria. And that he's traveling with 2 Australian lads, and they like his Instagram posts at the moment are just hilarious because they are literally sleeping under a tarp and there was his post today, which was about they were in this little town that never gets tourists. And this lady stopped and was like, "Are you guys lost? Are you okay? Like, what are you doing here? They never get tourists." And they found out that they were sleeping in the bushes. And they went, "Okay, go to this shop, buy fireworks, and before you go to sleep, set them off so the bears run away." Like,
that's insane.
Yeah, but no, travel's amazing, man.
I've got a question for you. So, in all the time that you've traveled, what is the most unexpected lesson that you've learned from traveling that you were like, now that you look back in hindsight, you're like, I don't really think traveling will teach me this lesson,
Oh, a lesson that I learned while traveling.
While you're thinking about it, I'll rift
Yeah.
with my one. So for me, I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier on. And for me, the most unexpected lesson that I've learned has been, just putting yourself out there does really good things for you in life. Like, I've traveled solo a lot. And even last year when I did my 6 months between jobs, when I finished my previous job and I went to the US, I was traveling in the US alone in Florida. People were like, watch out, Florida man's a thing. You got to make sure you don't go down the wrong street there, or there's all these stereotypes, which I've been to the US before. I know it's BS because I've been there. Like, I know it's people aren't as bad as they make it out to be on mainstream media.
Yes.
And again, while I was traveling on my own, and I've done this many a times, just reaching out to people, talking to people. Like, I went to this water park, water park quite close to one of the Coco. I'm trying to think what was the name of it. Cabana. I think it was Cabana. Something was the resort, and it was like right next to it. But in any case, I went there, made friends with random people that day that were there. We had the best time. Went out the night. Like afterwards, they were showing me a little bit of Orlando. Just by reaching out, talking to people. It's literally how I got my job the first time I ever traveled overseas, similar to how I got a job in New Zealand. Like, word of mouth. It's all about who you know. People always have this thing about, it's nepotism and that kind of thing. No, it's networking. It's called networking. Put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to do it. I think that was, obviously I took a risk, and some people will say, well, you already were a risk taker by going to, I guess, the UK at 18 on my own, but still I could have gone there and like retracted into my shell and not been successful, not been sitting here today, have to go back because I loaned money to go there from my dad, which I had to pay back. Wasn't given the money or anything like that. I didn't like that. That wasn't my dad. My dad was like, no, you're going to pay this back. So,
back.
and I think it was a good thing that he did that.
It takes too long to be interest.
There's that saying, when you go somewhere, burn the boats. Don't have like a backup plan or going back. It was kind of, I think, what he did to me. He forced me to grow up very quickly by doing that. And that was my unexpected lesson. It's just putting yourself out there, which I still live by that even today. I'm not afraid to put myself out there.
I genuinely would have to agree. One of the things that my wife and I agreed on, especially when we moved to the UAE and the Middle East, was just to say yes to things, say yes to opportunities. So you get invited to go out to a barbecue, say yes. Don't go, oh no, it's not going to work. If you're going to be tired the next day, you're going to be tired the next day. Just do it anyway. And that was something that by just saying yes and just being yourself, being polite, being welcoming, makes a huge difference. I'm someone who likes to say hello to people, and I'll give the stranger down the street a smile just because that's the right thing to do. And the amount of times just being that person where you're giving someone a smile and saying good morning has opened up options and opportunities. It just that like I could tell you story after story of situations we've got into and experiences we've had just by being that person to said hello, good morning, how are you? It's or in the Middle East it was salam alaikum. The amount of time like that happened, and you like like I said, I could go into stories of things, situations I've been in, but genuinely just saying yes and saying, sure, I'm keen to give that a try. Someone offers you some food to try it. Don't go, oh no, I don't. That just try it. Be accommodating and also be, don't be afraid to say yes. I suppose is probably the answer there.
Yeah, listen, with the food situation, I don't know if I could say yes to all foods. Like, I'm a bit of a picky eater myself, but I hear you on that, and I totally agree with the premise of it. Like, you just say yes to things, put yourself out there. Traveling does that. Traveling gives you that kind of confidence. Also, for me, it was a fact of being able to go so young, and it taught me that you don't need these support systems around you, and that support systems, comfort is the enemy sometimes. Like, when it comes to personal growth and development, it's the enemy. You fall back on safety nets if they're there. But if they're not there, now suddenly you have to think about stuff. Now you've got to make your own decision. Now suddenly you're the person in the driver's seat, and it's uncomfortable for people. But if you can push past that, and if you can see a little bit of success by doing something on your own that you didn't think was going to be possible, you now have that Neuralink in the brain that's telling you, no, you actually, I've got a win. I've got a win stacked in my head. I figured this thing out on my own. And then it forces other good habits and decisions being made, basically.
And it's much more rewarding as well. It's a much
Yeah.
more rewarding feeling when you've managed to achieve that by yourself and on your own, making those decisions yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
I to be fair, I've never traveled internationally by myself. I've always been with my wife, so we're a bit of a team. And what one of us struggles with, the other one thrives in. So we sort of work in that way really well.
Well, I'll put it out there. Like, I love traveling on my own. It's a lot of fun. I've done a lot of it, but I feel like now I'm on the other side of it where I'm like, actually, it'd be pretty cool to share that with someone. And I can see how that's another way that's really fun, because some of the, like, when I think back about it, like the biggest growth moments in my life has been the times where I've traveled on my own and I've had to figure things out on my own. And it's built resilience, it's built confidence and all those good things that we spoke about earlier on. But then when I think about some of the best memories I had, it was with the boys in the UK when we were watching the Rugby World Cup, sharing those memories with them. It's when my friend Caesar from New Zealand came over to do the cruise with me last year in the Bahamas and in the Caribbean. I think about the Japan trip, which I went with a big group to that. So sometimes having those moments where you've experienced things with others, you've got someone you can say, hey, you remember that time we got up and did this, which is also amazing. So both definitely has some benefits to them. But what I'm trying to say is that if you're someone that is like in between and you don't have someone to travel with, don't feel like you need it. You can.
Oh, no, you definitely do not. You definitely do not. Get out there.
And you will never regret it.
There's quite a good quote by that I quite like, which you'll appreciate, and it probably links to what you're saying too. Whereas I talk a lot, I tell a lot of stories, but I've thankfully got someone that with my wife that go, yeah, no, he's telling the truth. That did happen. Whereas I think if I traveled a bit by myself and got into some of these situations, people would start going, no, man, you're telling bloody bullshit there. And there's a quote, but there's an old traveler, Moroccan traveler called Ibn Battuta. And his quote is, traveling, it leaves you speechless, then it turns you into a storyteller. And I very much... that one resonated with me. As a teacher, I spent a lot of time telling stories, and the kids used to love my stories because I'd go off on tangents, and if they could find the right trigger, they could get me off at a tangent for 15 minutes telling a story about X, Y, and Z. And that's something travel, people have stories, and I found that travel definitely added to my tapestry of stories and the tapestry of life that wouldn't have happened if I just stayed in New Zealand. And they talk about your country of origin as like the world is like a house, and if you stay in your country of origin, you're just staying in your bedroom and you've not explored the rest of the rooms of your house. And that's something that we've still got rooms to explore. As a family, we still watch a lot of shows about travel and different places around the world because, man, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of really 100%. Interesting things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you kind of touched on it earlier as well when you spoke about coming back, hearing people complain or talk about the same things that they've always spoken about. And it becomes so evident to you. It's almost like you break out of the matrix. You break out of your day to day. This is what your life's like driving. And we all go back into that at some degree. Like, I've already got a new routine in Melbourne since I've moved here. Cause I mean, that's part of being human, but traveling around and living in different places, even like moving, like I did, like I didn't realize how much I needed. Like, I knew I needed the move out of Auckland when I decided to do it. But again, it was sort of just reinforced for me getting into Melbourne. Getting to experience something new, seeing how people live in over here in Australia and Melbourne, which is not a place. It's funny enough, I didn't spend a lot of time in Melbourne. I spent a lot of time in Perth. I've spent some time in Sydney. And it was different even to my expectations once again, moving here as well. And again, it just makes you feel alive. Like traveling, moving to different places, changing up your routine makes you feel alive. You've got different things that's going on that you can talk about. But for me, it really is one of those things where there's nothing wrong with having the same stories and having the same routine. But for me, it's just my personality type. It would never work. It would never work. And I spot it so quickly nowadays. Whenever I do go back to South Africa, the strangest thing that has happened for me, and I probably will touch on this, is that as someone that has now lived abroad as much of my life as I've lived in the country, 18-18 split. It's this bizarre feeling of, you go back to South Africa, you're a South African, you'll always be very proud of that heritage and things like that, but you can still feel very out of place because you've spent enough time out of the country that
reverse culture shock.
Yeah, you kind of, when you make just the small deviation in your mentality and how you see things and like how you approach the world, after that amount of time, you've gone in such a big opposite direction that there's this gaping gap. By the time you get back to South Africa and you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff I love about South Africa as well. And this is no shade to it, but you change, and and it's a weird feeling. It's that feeling of familiarity when you go back, but still feeling almost like a stranger in your own country. It's probably the best way that I can put it.
Yeah. And that is, there is definitely that reverse culture shock, and they talk about it. A lot of travel places talk about it too. When you've lived overseas for a while and you come back, and it's that trying to get back into the rhythm and routine. Like one of the things we missed and still miss, there's lots of things. We spent 7 years in the UAE in Al Ain, and you mentioned about the call to prayer. We got so used to that. It seemed for the first while, it seemed strange that we weren't hearing that. We missed that. There are certain things that you miss when you move back to your home country, and there are certain things you get used to and you love, and you don't realize there's certain things you don't realize you would miss by leaving, and that was something that caught us by surprise.
Being over in New Zealand now and the same for Australia, as most countries are like this. Overseas, you put in gas in your own car. You go back to South Africa, there's a gas attendant who puts in gas in your car. And I didn't realize how much I miss putting gas in my car. I actually, because I'm such an independent person and I do everything for myself, I find it very difficult to let go of the control and letting this gas attendant come and put the gas in my car. I'm like, what if he does the wrong thing? What if he puts diesel in my petrol car, or something like that? It's such a weird feeling.
See, we're in the UAE, you pull up, you don't even turn the car off and they're filling your petrol up. They fill the car up for you, but you leave the car running because you want the AC to keep you cool.
I could see that.
So you say about that, I miss being able to pull up to a Bacala, which is their shop, honk the horn, and someone comes out to your window and asks what you want, and then you say, "Can I get X, Y, and Z?" And they run back in, grab it, bring it out, and then you pay them.
Too comfortable, mate. Too comfortable for me. Mate. I couldn't let go of the control. I need to get out of the car. I need to go buy my own groceries.
Oh no! Roll the dice. That's part of the challenge, man. Roll the dice. You don't know what they're going to. You don't know if they're going to get what you want, but you roll the dice and hope for the best. But then you get to little cafes that they know what you want. They know the type of food you like, and they just sort of see you pull up and they start organizing your order before you even wind the window down.
Is there any other questions you wanted to ask? Anything you wanted to get into from a travel perspective?
Bucket list destination. What would be, say, 2 places or 3 places that you haven't been to yet that you'd really like to get to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like at some point you need to do Antarctica. Like, I feel like that would just be like, these cruises.
That'd be cool. And
I hate the cold, but it's like, again, like, I just feel like it would be such a experience to be able to go to Antarctica. And then at the same time, I'd love to go to Argentina. I reckon Argentina would be really cool. I've never done South America, so I'd love to get into that continent as well. So I put Argentina, I'll put Antarctica, and I was supposed to go to Canada last year, and then things changed in my plans. So those ones would be good as individual destinations, but I also know that Europe would probably, like, if I had to choose one, if you said, what's your number one, those would be the really nice destinations that I want to tick off that I haven't done yet. But if you said you can only go one place and then use that as your base, Europe, because I do need to do Europe as a whole at some point. So maybe when I am in between jobs again, which I know my bosses, if they're listening to this, they're probably saying, don't quit on us yet, Chris, you're so new to the job. But if I get that opportunity to have like some gap time again, like 3 months, 6 months or something like that, I'd love to go to Europe. I thought last year that would be the perfect time to do it, and then my plans changed, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's definitely still a couple of places that I think is out there. There's many places that I can still see myself visiting. How about yourself? Any bucket list destinations?
So there's different ones. The one that we've got as a family, I think would be a great one to do is, as we touched on it before, was Japan. I think I'd like to do it when my boys are a bit older though, so they can have a bit of independence and sort of know a few different places that they want to go specifically themselves. I think Japan. Like I'd even if the right position came up, I'd be interested in working there for a little bit, just so to actually get a good chance to look around. Like I think that Japan's one of those places. I think you'd only scratch the surface whenever you visit. I think it's a place you could probably visit, a week, a year till you die, and you'd probably still find interesting, cool little bits and bobs and stuff.
I couldn't imagine that it would be too difficult to get a job there for someone like yourself. But you got to find the right one, mate. And
our kids are a little bit little yet to be going into like I'd be just anxious. Our boys are really loud, and I've seen housing in Japan. It's quite.
How's the Japanese? Is it getting on?
They can count. They can count to 10. They're working on karate, so they can count to 10. That's about as far as I've got. Japan, and then I think we were lucky enough to get to Egypt before all the COVID craziness hit, and that was one of our big bucket lists that my wife and I had.
Cool.
Yeah, Egypt was really cool. And we would love to do like an RV style, like 3-month travel through America. We've got quite a few friends in America that would love to visit, especially sort of like upstate New York and through like Pennsylvania, which is all on the East Coast. So we'd love to do that, and then sort of travel from east to west, and then go and visit all the theme parks and that sort of stuff. But I think an RV trip, if America sort of shit and we sort of felt like it would be something that would be quite safe for us to do, I think it would be something we would love. But and I always want to do cruises. I'd love to do a cruise. There's some really cool looking cruises.
Have you done cruises?
No,
before?
never. And I would love to.
Listen, you and I need to talk about this cruise situation, because we got to get on a cruise. Like,
mate, I'd love it.
Eyeballing this cruise that at the moment I'm eyeballing a cruise that runs. I think it's a Royal Caribbean cruise that runs Singapore to Japan. So it does like Japan, it does South Korea, Seoul, it does Hong Kong, and then it goes down Vietnam and then through to Singapore as a cruise. And I think the only thing is I think it's like a 10 to 14 day cruise. But what I like about that is that basically you've got this hotel that is moving with all of the entertainment you could possibly want, all of the food, all of the drinks.
And then you've got all the cities that do.
Very cost effective. You stop at the city, you bump out, you quickly go into the cities, you go do some experiences there. And I can give you some tips on how to save on experiences compared to what you'll pay through the cruise lines and stuff. But 100%, mate. Like that's one that I'm considering. And then if you're looking for something a bit more short term, there's obviously a lot that goes from Aussie to surrounding areas and the islands and stuff like that as well. So we definitely should talk. But if you're thinking of going on a cruise, I wouldn't mind piggybacking on something like that. The problem that I find though, well, for me, we're talking about these bucket list destinations. Where would we like to go? What would we like to do? It's just so bloody hard to get leave from work. That is it's. The problem is, like, if you work and you're a grown up and you've got the money to travel, you don't have the time. And then when you're too young, you don't have the money, and you've got all the time. That's the constant catch-22 that we're having to deal with as adults.
And that was, I must admit, when we're in the Middle East and even in the UK, being a teacher, you had those holidays, and if you managed your time well, you could travel when you. And that was one thing we loved about the UK is you had your 3 terms. And then you teach for 6 weeks, you had a week off. You teach for 6 weeks, you had 2 weeks off. And then during the summer, you had your 6 weeks.
Or got in the wrong profession.
Mate, but
because I still teach. My job, I teach daily as well. I just don't get the holidays. I don't get the breaks.
No. But you work for a travel company. Surely you can say, look, I need to experience these places that I'm trying to get these guys to advertise for you.
Like this, I've got a couple of trips coming up, but a lot of them are just like little local trips around Australia, because I'm also new to Australia, so I'm exploring a lot of places in Australia at the moment, which I am really enjoying. Gold Coast, highly recommend it. Loved my time on the Gold Coast earlier this year. could easily see myself living there if there was like enough good work opportunities. I love the climate, love the beach. Reminded me a lot of Florida, actually.
By the way, I've never actually been to Australia. Of all the countries I've been to, I've never been to Australia.
We got it.
I've only ever flown in, been in the airport, and then flown out. I've never actually stepped foot on Australian soil, theoretically.
I reckon if this podcast gets to like 1,000 subs or something, we got to get you to come over. We do a podcast in person, and then I get you to explore. Like, I reckon that's a good goal to have. You know,
okay.
Get to 1,000. Right. We get if we get to 1,000 subs, we get Will over to Melbourne. He's coming over to Melbourne, and I'm going to be showing him around. Like, we'll have to make a plan. And there's enough of the boys that live here now as well that, you know, we can catch up with Esteban and that as well. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Who knows? Howie will probably live here in a couple of years from now as well. So, you know, he's working his way over slowly. But yeah, I think that would be good. And yeah, like I'm doing a lot of those little trips in Australia at the moment. Which is going to be a lot of fun. And then I'm coming back to New Zealand actually in June. I'll be in Auckland, unfortunately, so probably won't catch up with you in that time because you're in the South Island. New Zealand is small, but it's still big if you're in the two opposite.
And it costs more to go from North Island to South Island than it does to go to Australia.
Yeah, 100%. And so I'll be back in New Zealand, and then end of the year I'm going back to South Africa. So that's another part of being an immigrant. You always have to remember, out of your 4 weeks of holiday, you get 2 weeks is probably going to be spent going back home. So you only have like 2 other weeks to really play with. But next year, I think, is the one that I'm kind of like, I'm looking at Bali potentially as an option because my company does a lot of packages in Bali. So there'll be some stuff, I'm sure, coming up. But this year feels like it's kind of like booked out, especially with my job being quite high. It's full on, like, you know.
And you're still pretty fresh to it, you know, like it's you're still.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like missing a couple of days last week, coming back this week, it's been absolute chaos.
Yes. How was because last week you were in Sydney, weren't you, last weekend for the Spartan race? How did it go? How's the body? How was the body this week?
Well, the thing is, here's I know
we're not getting any younger.
Yeah, off topic for everybody about the travel stuff, but I'm sure some people will want to know if they have followed. So not getting younger or anything like that, but it's for me, I came down with, like, a lot of people in my company had like flu over the last couple of weeks, and I started feeling really average mid last week. So I actually had the Wednesday off, the Thursday was a public holiday, and the Friday was planned leave. So I ended up having all 3 days to recover prior to the race. Went into the race not feeling as good as I probably should have, but ended up doing extremely well. Obviously, I ran in the non-competitive heat this time because it's my first time back since about 4.5 years now since I've competed. But in the non-competitive heat, I ended up 28th overall out of 500 people. So I did extremely well. And then for my age bracket, there were 50 people in the non-competitive heat, and I placed third in my age bracket. So, so not bad for a first race back. It's a great foundation to work off. And then, you know, obviously we'll talk maybe about Spartan races, what got me into some of these insane things in sports the future in a different podcast. But I think that's it. Unless you've got anything else you wanted to bring up, anything else you wanted to talk about traveling wise.
Trevor, we can see what the interest is like. If there's many comments, we can always have another travel podcast a bit later on down the track too, because it's something 100%. We could probably, like I said, stories for days. And we can.
I think we could go specific as well. Like, I mean, I wanted to touch just on how travel changed our lives, I guess, you know, to a certain degree, and some of the influences that it's sort of had in our lives. And then, you know, if people really enjoy this, they want to hear more about it, we can go into deeper about the UK, we can go in deeper about the US, my experience there, or wherever we've been, to Japan or things like that. I do think there'll be a great opportunity to talk about New Zealand, since both myself and Will is very familiar with New Zealand. And then obviously South Africa. If people are interested in going to Africa, I can talk about that as well. So there's so many things we could still dive into if people want to hear more content about this. So let us know. Like this channel, literally from 1 week to the next, we're going to be listening to the audience and what they want to hear, what they want to do. And if we don't have that feedback immediately, we're just going to go where the wind blows us, and we'll talk about the next topic on the podcast. But for me personally, you know, I've had a lot of fun catching up with you all over the last hour. I think this has been a great podcast.
It went very quickly. I can't believe it's been an hour and 18 minutes.
Yeah. So if you're new to the channel, if you've just, you know, come over to the extra take from the Nullified Take, and you like this kind of content, you know, hearing a little bit of a different take on some of the things that myself and Will have been up to, this podcast is going to be wide, like I said, in its topics every single week. It's more just about, you know, life, music, travel, maybe a little bit of gaming, maybe a little bit of reactions in the future to certain content on YouTube and things like that. This is just a different creative outlet for both of us, and somewhere where we can let loose a little bit after a hard week of working, I should say. So, consider subscribing, hit the like button, put the notification bell on, and leave a comment below. Let us know what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what you like. Like I said, we'd love to hear from you.
Travel tips, if you're watching it and went, oh, if you watch this and go, oh, definitely recommend going here or don't go there. Let us know.
Yeah. Where should we go next? Like, what should be on our bucket list opposed to what we put on our bucket list? Is there any obvious ones that you guys feel like this is a must see? You've got to go there based on your own experience. But for now, this is it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next week. Bye.